What's up, everybody? Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we are going to continue with our divisional previews in preparation for your fantasy football season this year. We will be doing the NFC South today, so we will be going through all four of the NFC South teams. We'll be talking quarterbacks, running backs, wide receiver, tight end, defense, and kicker. We will go through where there is good value among these teams in your draft, where there are potential sleepers, and where there may be potential busts as well. So if you're interested in more content like this, please subscribe to the channel and drop a question in the comments if you have any. I reply to all my commenters, so please take advantage of that with this small channel. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask. And the goal of this channel is to help you win a fantasy football championship this season. So we're starting now. We're going through divisional previews. You look at my previous videos from the past few weeks. I also have a quarterback and tight end preview video that came out relatively recently. We will be doing defense and kicker this weekend. We will also be doing running backs and wide receivers in the upcoming weeks and doing some mock drafts as well to help you get ready for this fantasy football season. All right, so we will go through each of these NFC South teams. We will start with the Atlanta Falcons. And Michael Penix Jr. as the starting quarterback of the Atlanta Falcons is a quarterback that I talked about in my video with the quarterback rankings, that he is not going particularly high. I don't have him ranked particularly high, especially in single quarterback leagues. But as a second quarterback in Superflex leagues, I think there's a lot of value with Michael Penix Jr. He has some concerns about what his ceiling is, which is why he's not ranked super high, because partially he's more of a pocket quarterback. He also, so he doesn't have as much rushing value because he's a pocket quarterback. We also have not really seen very much of him in the pros, so although he has looked good at times, he didn't really have amazing fantasy performances. So a lot of unknown with him. But if you're looking at a good second quarterback to take a flyer on, especially in those super flex leagues, I think that Michael Penix Jr. is a great option to consider. And the nice thing is that he does have some good weapons around him, like Bijan, Drake London, Darnell Mooney, etc. So there's a lot of good things that you like here that could give you some good upside. I personally don't have him ranked very high in my rankings, though, but I could see a world where he does have a good fantasy season for you. Kirk Cousins is the backup here. He is still on the team, surprisingly. A lot of people thought he would get traded, but I just think he simply doesn't have a lot of value around the league. I would be keeping an eye on him in trade discussions, though, because as of right now, he has no fantasy value as the backup. But if anything were to happen to another team where they lose a starter, then perhaps Kirk Cousins could be traded there and could all of a sudden become a hot waiver wire pickup. Easton Stick as the third string quarterback is not relevant for fantasy. Bijan Robinson as the starting running back. So Bijan to me is my number 4 player on my big board and my second running back. He is behind Saquon Barkley at his position, but behind Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson as the overall players that I'd rather have. So ultimately, this is excellent for Bijan. He gives you great receiving upside. He also, especially later on as the season went along with Raheem Morris, they started to involve him quite a bit. He kind of had a rough start to his rookie season because Arthur Smith was trying to mix him in with Tyler Algier and not properly utilizing him, which was the case with almost everybody in Arthur Smith's system on this team. But Bijan is pretty much locked in as an elite fantasy running back this season and one of the best players that you can get, especially in the mid to early rounds of the first round in your drafts. Tyler Algier is a good handcuff to have for Bijan. He has been productive in fantasy at times, and now that he has kind of clearly assumed the second running back role in Atlanta, I think it's important if you do draft Bijan with your first round pick that you do handcuff him with Tyler Algier just in case anything happens. Because we have seen Algier be pretty effective even with Bijan there. So that being said, he is one of the guys that if you're in a deep league and you're looking to have running back handcuffs rostered, if you have Bijan Robinson, you definitely want to have Tyler Algier. We had a lot of injuries last season too. Starting running backs of note, especially Christian McCaffrey, drafted early, and his handcuffs were very valuable throughout the 2024 season. Carlos Washington and Elijah Dotson are the backups. Not expecting much from them. This is pretty clearly two running backs that could likely be fantasy relevant on this team, but not much beyond that unless of an injury. Drake London, again, is one of the other good valued receivers that I really like. He is going in the mid-second round, which is pretty good value for him given the circumstances. I really like Drake London as somebody that can be a target hog for this team, get a majority of the targets, but it's not costing you as much as you would with some of the other first-round receivers. So a good strategy to have if you do get one of the better running backs early on, and if you do want to take a chance on a guy that could be a reliable number one receiver, a good option to look at for you is Drake London, who, as I said, on average is going mid-second round. A good guy that I've been targeting around that range. Very similar to my projection of how A.J. Brown will be is how I view Drake London. Yeah, I think he's pretty clearly got the top receiver role on this team, and there's a pretty big drop-off after that. Darnell Mooney is currently injured, but I don't really expect it will be an issue that will keep him from starting week one. I think that he will be just fine. And the thing I like about Mooney is that he's going as a 12th round pick. So that being said, you are getting pretty good value there too. Darnell Mooney for most of last season was an excellent receiver who gave you some wide receiver 2 value for most of the season and was a starting caliber player. He did kind of have some down games at times, but as somebody that you're getting that far in the draft, this is again excellent value for you, and one of the wide receivers that if you want somebody on your bench that could just give you a consistent floor that you may be able to start from time to time, I think Mooney is one of the better options that you have. Let's take a look at some of the guys going around his range in terms of the other wide receivers. You have two Colts wide receivers, Downs and Michael Pittman. I think I would rather have Darnell Mooney than both of those guys because you at least kind of know what you're... Maybe not Josh Downs. Josh Downs, to me, has the potential upside, especially in PPR, to be a good receiver, but with risk. Emeka Egbuka, we don't really know what his role is. Other guys around there, Jaden Higgins and Keon Coleman. Those are, again, high upside plays, but come with risk. If you want somebody that you can take safely in the 12th round that you could probably be most likely to be a starting caliber player, it would be Mooney. He doesn't really give you quite the upside of some of those other names, especially Coleman and Downs are the ones that come to mind, but still one of the better receivers that you can get late among those other names that I just mentioned. Ray McLeod, he had okay games from time to time, but I don't really feel like he's going to have a role that will really be sustainable. He'll be a stream consideration in certain matchups, but not a starter, in my opinion. DJ Chark sticking around in the league on this team as competing for the 4th and 5th wide receiver spots with Kaderil Hodge, who's been there for a bit. It's good to see DJ Chark continuing to stay in this league. A lot of potential, but just kind of injuries really kind of got the best of him in his career. So those are the other wide receivers. And again, there isn't really a name that stands out. They didn't really draft any rookies that could potentially move in to threaten any of these other guys like Mooney or McLeod. So because of that, you kind of like Drake London standing and you like Darnell Mooney standing. I talked about Kyle Pitts extensively in my tight end video, so if you want to see a little bit more on that, you could check out that video. I personally am not a Kyle Pitts guy at all, as you've probably seen from my previous videos. I think that he comes with a lot of risk and a lot of hypothetical upside that just never materializes. So for that reason, I generally avoid Kyle Pitts. The thing that you can get as a benefit this year is that he has dropped off quite a bit in his ADP compared to where it is in years past. I do feel like there is going to be kind of a hype train that emerges for him in which he starts to get drafted as we lead closer to draft day. But as of right now, as an undrafted guy, it's not. If he's on waivers, it's an option that's interesting to pick up. But I personally would not be trying to count on him. I would be trying to look elsewhere. So you can check out more about that in my tight end video where I rank him compared to some other tight ends in my Kyle Pitts tier. But I mean, hypothetically, there is a world where he can be successful in this offense. He just has not done that yet, so I'm skeptical. The other backups to me are not particularly interesting at the tight end position here. The Atlanta defense does have some talent, particularly Jesse Bates, Leonard Floyd, guys like that. They do have some talent on defense, but I don't really feel like they're going to be a draftable defense to me. They are going to be interesting in certain streaming matchups, but not a team that I would be looking to take draft day. And then Younghoe Koo is a pretty solid kicker for the past 5 years or so. He plays in a dome, which is, again, a nice asset to have for a kicker, especially in late in the season. Going right around the kicker 5 to 10 range in drafts. I would love to have him if he does not get drafted. I'll explain a little bit more about my kicker strategy in the video coming out this weekend, but he would be one of the guys to target if he does not get drafted as somebody I'd want to pick up for the first week. But I generally do not draft kickers, and I will explain why in that video. Next, we have the Carolina Panthers. And Carolina has been a pretty poor team for the last handful of seasons, but they did show some promise last year later in the season with Dave Canales. And Bryce Young is where we start there. Remember, Bryce Young was benched in, I believe it was like late September. It was pretty early of the season last year, but then he eventually got a starting job back and showed some promise that maybe they should not be trying to draft a rookie quarterback to take a spot, and they'll give him another year to try it out. So Bryce Young, again, much like Michael Penix, he is in a position where he does present some interesting upside if you're looking for a good second quarterback to have. Bryce Young, he does give you a little bit more mobility than Michael Penix, so maybe he could be a little bit more of a ground threat, but he really has not, despite somebody who in college was known for his quickness, has not really been an elite runner at the pro level. So the hope is that he can kind of improve in his consistency so that he could be a little bit more reliable. But he did become pretty interesting for fantasy later in the season, and you hope he could continue to capitalize on that because they do have some better weapons around him now that could help. Andy Dalton is the backup. Should anything happen to Bryce Young, I think Andy Dalton could make himself relevant because he is pretty effective at moving the offense in a given opportunity, but he commits so many turnovers. That's part of the reason why he's a backup now rather than a consistent starter. I'm very curious if Jack Plummer is related to Jake Plummer. That's a throwback to my 2000s days of watching the NFL. Jake the Snake. Chuba Hubbard is the starting running back here, and this is one of the more underrated running backs that you're getting at a pretty good price. Chuba Hubbard is going right around the 4th and maybe even the 5th round in some leagues. I'm just trying to double check. So in sleeper mocks, I've seen him generally between the 4th and the 5th. Maybe late 5th is the latest that I've seen him go. But this is a guy that was a very good running back last season, and until he got hurt, he was a top 10 running back on the season. So I think that Chuba Hubbard is definitely somebody that's a great target late. If you lock up some good early receivers early on, or if you're looking for a good second running back with upside, Chuba Hubbard is somebody that I really like. The question mark, though, with this team is that you have quite a bit of more uncertainty. So now they have Rico Dowdle, who just rushed for 1,000 yards with the Dallas Cowboys last season. I'm surprised Dallas didn't try to keep him, to be honest, because I think he's kind of better than their options they have now. But Rico Dowdle will be there and could compete for touches. I still feel like this is Chuba Hubbard's backfield, but I do expect Rico Dowdle will get some involvement there. And then you have Trevor Etienne, who is the brother of Travis Etienne. I believe he was a 4th-round pick. I'm going to double-check this. But so he kind of projects to be more of a pass-catching option that can kind of be involved. And he was a 4th-round pick from Georgia. He had previously played at Florida as well, I believe. So Trevor Etienne will be involved in this backfield. So you may be, I think part of the skepticism on Chuba Hubbard is if there is a committee. But I do feel like Chuba Hubbard is still a good name to take in the 5th round that could potentially, give you some good upside again this season. I think at the same time, these other two are other very interesting options, especially Rico Dowdle, who is not getting drafted. That is a great handcuff name to have for Chuba Hubbard that if anything happens to him can definitely be a RB2, definite starting level running back on your team. Another name I do want to bring up as well is Jonathan Brooks, who, he had his ACL injury in college, and then he played a few games in the pros, and then he had the same injury again. And I think that there is a very good chance that this was a guy that was highly hyped up last season as one of the better rookie running backs for his upside whenever he does get healthy. But the reality of it is that 2025 was the year of, good starting level running backs in that draft. And I think because we've seen a couple injuries now to Jonathan Brooks, he has a pretty murky future going forward. So if you're in a dynasty league and you're holding on to Jonathan Brooks, I would personally try to cut bait. It's unfortunate that this guy's had he has a lot of talent, but unfortunately, 2 devastating injuries very early in his career really makes it difficult for me to see him being able to find footing in the NFL right now, at least to be rosterable. The wide receiver core has improved with Carolina. They added Teteroa McMillan as their top 10 draft pick to this team this season, and he projects to be the wide receiver 1 in Carolina. I think this is a pretty good pick to take him as the top wide receiver in Carolina. He's going around the early 7th to late 6th round. So we did see some issues with this Carolina team in terms of having consistency with the other guys. Xavier Legette, a guy that I really liked last season on multiple occasions to potentially step up. And this guy he's very talented, but he's also very raw. Probably needs some more development. But I think with the signing of McMillan, I think that definitely is a threat to Legette's fantasy value. And then Adam Thielen, I do want to throw out as a pretty good late name to consider as a wide receiver with some PPR upside. Adam Thielen does have very good rapport with Bryce Young when he has been healthy. It's just Adam Thielen at this point is pretty old for wide receiver standards. But when he is healthy, I think he does play a good role as a possession receiver that will give you some points in PPR and be pretty valuable for fantasy himself. They also bring back Jalen Coker, who had some flashes last season but just doesn't get the opportunity. And then Hunter Renfrow is coming back. This was one of the more drastic fall-offs that I never really understood. Hunter Renfrow in 2021 during his rookie season was a Pro Bowl wide receiver. A lot of people forget that. With Las Vegas. But then when they switched over to Josh McDaniels and the coaching staff kept changing over, he just kind of got he just kind of fell out of favor and just kind of really fell out of the league. So it was a very weird turn of events for Hunter Renfrow. Hopefully now that he's closer to his, his roots in Carolina, back where he played, close to where he played at Clemson, he can kind of get things figured out. But just a very weird case that I never really understood. The tight ends here are interesting, and a name that I do want to bring up that I didn't really talk about in my tight end video, but I think does have some intrigue, is Jatavion Sanders. Sanders was a rookie last season that started to show some promise at a certain point in the season, but then he had an unfortunate neck injury that kind of derailed his progress as a tight end, and he got quite a bit of targets up until that point. I couldn't put him into my top 32 for the video I made the other day, but he's a name to keep an eye on for a void that does need to be filled. So to me, among all these pass catchers, T-Mac is the guy that I think will ultimately be the wide receiver 1, and I think there's a very good chance that he could get the majority of targets on this team. Then I would be looking at Adam Thielen and then Legette, if Legette can kind of get his drops and just route running and all that stuff under control. But Sanders is interesting to me, and then Tommy Tremble is listed as the starter, but I would rather go the upside of Sanders as a younger player that maybe he has a better chance of filling a role as he gets more comfortable in the pros. The Panthers defense is not of interest to me. J.C. Horn, good cornerback. A lot of the other names of note are not really names that I'm that excited about. I think they're one of the defenses I would probably be trying to avoid for fantasy in a situation where I would have to play them even given the stream matchup. And then Matthew Wright as the kicker is not interesting to me either. Next we have the New Orleans Saints. And this will probably be one of my shorter videos for fantasy because there is really not a lot of good options here on this team. This, to me, projects as one of the worst offenses in the league for fantasy. And this is honestly sad considering that they have Alvin Kamara, who's one of the best running backs in the NFL. But, you know, I thought it was like really telling to me just the whole Shedeur Sanders situation and how he continued to drop in the draft, that New Orleans would actually rather go with Tyler Shuck, who I believe he's 26 as a rookie. I know that he backed up Justin Herbert at Oregon, which is just crazy. And then he's played like multiple years in college because of the COVID year and additional eligibility. He is 25 years old, and he's getting the opportunity to start. But I honestly would not be surprised if Spencer Rattler kind of gives him a run for his money and potentially, you know, makes a case to be the starter himself. But either way, like, this is the worst quarterback room in the NFL, in my opinion. Jake Hayner in there as well. Surprised he even has a job in this league. But all these guys, I mean, the one upside that you have with this team is that Kellen Moore is a great offensive mind. Maybe he can kind of figure out a way to make this offense successful with an experienced guy from college and Tyler Shuck. But I think there's a legitimate case to be made if you're doing a redraft league, if you just would rather, or I mean, if you're doing a redraft superflex league, if it would just be better to leave Tyler Shuck on waivers and try to get better flex players that could probably give you more points than he can at quarterback. That's just how I see it right now. Barring any big surprise, I don't really see him having a breakout season or really being very good for fantasy at all, to be honest with you. And a lot of that is because of the receivers, which I will talk about now. I'm going to skip running back for just a sec to talk about his receivers. This is, again, another very ugly receiving core in terms of fantasy. Chris Olave is, you know, he's been a relative disappointment relative to, you know, where he's been drafted. And that's, I think, because he's just dealt with so many injuries. He's now going in the late 7th. The year before, he was a 2nd or 3rd round pick for multiple seasons. But this is a guy that I'm just not very comfortable in even taking in the 7th round because of his injury history. And so you do have the quarterback kind of going against him. You have a rookie that has not played in the NFL. It's, you know, how is his ability going to be to get him the ball down the field when he didn't really look all that amazing in college anyway at Louisville? And then you combine that with all the concussions, and he's gotten to the point where he's had so many concussions in his career that he may face a lengthy absence should he have another one again, kind of like what we saw with Tua. So that you have that going against Chris Olave. So because of that, I'm avoiding him at that ADP. Rashid Shaheed, I keep messing up his name. He is going very late in drafts if he is getting drafted. If not, he's undrafted. That to me is a little bit more interesting because he actually was pretty good for fantasy up until he got hurt last year. But that was with Derek Carr and a different offensive scheme under Clint Kubiak. So can Kellen Moore and company figure out a way to get Rashid Shaheed in a position to be successful as a wide receiver for fantasy? It's possible. I think I would, of all the receivers, I would rather take the chance on Shaheed than any of these other guys. Brandon Cooks to me is washed at this point. I don't really know why he continues to get jobs as a starting wide receiver. You have Bub Means, who Well, I'd just say this about him. He was in the fantasy picture briefly last season when there were multiple injuries, and he really didn't do anything with it. You have Cedric Wilson Jr., same thing. Dante Pettis continues to get jobs in this league. Donovan Peoples-Jones, that's a name from the past as well. All these guys to me are, there is not very much to look forward to. So if there is an argument for Rashid Shaheed, it would be the fact that he does have, doesn't have a lot around him. So we'll see if they can actually take advantage of that, though. So now we'll go to the running backs with the Saints. Alvin Kamara, to me, is one of the better running backs in fantasy, and I really like him for this season, just let alone the fact that they don't really have much else around him that's reliable. So I expect Kamara is going to be getting a lot of carries, a lot of receptions. And his receiving value alone in PPR makes him a must-start running back anyway. But Kamara, because of all the situation, his age, etc., he's going in the 5th round around the range of Amari and Hampton. And he's one of the running backs that I'm targeting because of the volume that I project he's going to get. I think there's a real chance, though, that he could get traded mid-season because of how bad I project the Saints will be this season. So because of that, it does make guys like Kendre Miller and the rookie they drafted, Devin Neal, interesting in the event of something happened to Kamara. I would rather take the chance on Neal because Kendre Miller has pretty much been injured through the majority of his career so far. Devin Neal is not a highly drafted player. I believe he was 5th or 6th round. But if there is an opportunity for him to step up, he's a 6th round pick out of Kansas. If anything were to happen to Kamara, this is a void that definitely needs to be filled, and Devin Neal could be the one to do that. As well as potentially Cam Akers, but I'm not sure he'll make the roster even. Tight ends. So I talked about Taysom Hill a little bit already. You can kind of go back and see a little bit more about that in my tight end video. But Taysom Hill is the ultimate wild card guy where when he does have his on games, he gives you some elite fantasy production. But the thing is that you never have any consistency with him because of the game planning and all that. Now he's got the ACL recovery on top of that for a guy who's, I believe, 35. So there's just a lot of question marks with Taysom Hill, but he is an interesting play because of a lot of people close to fantasy do believe in him, and I think that there is a chance that he will get a lot of value on the trade market if he has a good game. Juwan Johnson, I'm really not interested in for fantasy at all. I think that he's much like Kyle Pitts, he's had opportunities to be a top target on this team and has generally not taken advantage of it. You have Foster Moreau there as well. This team has really just kind of had a roulette of tight end involvement. It's just, this whole offense is pretty much a mess in my opinion. Other than Kamara, I don't really love any of these guys. If you want to take a chance on Shaheed, I think that's solid considering he's not getting drafted. Otherwise, not much love going to the Saints here. This defense, I think, could actually be pretty good this season. They've still got some great players, but there's a lot of I think just the offense is going to put them in a bad situation because they're probably going to be on the field a lot. Blake Grupe is actually a pretty solid kicker as well. Probably not going to get drafted this season. If this offense can be competent enough to just get into scoring position and kick a lot of field goals, then I could see Grupe being a good kicker that you can get undrafted. So that's something to keep an eye on too. Tampa Bay. So now we're getting into some more fantasy hitting big numbers type of team here with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Baker Mayfield, I talked about in my quarterback video, is in my second tier of guys. He's rated as my QB6 on the season. Really had a breakout last year with Tampa Bay, and I really don't see any reason why it'll stop this season. He's getting almost all his offense back, and if anything, he's getting them all back healthy. Because he was still very productive last season, even with the slew of injuries. They're going to be getting Chris Godwin back eventually. He's still on the pup, but I do think he'll be ready to go pretty early in the season. Emeka Ibuka coming in as a first-round wide receiver. There's a lot of great talent on this offense, and Baker Mayfield, to me, is pretty good value for where he's going in the drafts. He's going late enough after the wave of Hurts, Burrow, Jaden Daniels, those guys kind of up at the top. Baker Mayfield going around the early 7th to 8th round. Late 7th to early to mid 8th round. That's pretty good value for me to take Baker Mayfield, given that ADP. Kyle Trask, the backup again. The running back core is interesting. So Bucky Irving is the top running back in this system, and he's going as a 2nd round pick. Now, I really like Bucky Irving, and I do think he gives you some good value, but I don't like him that high. I do think that he did emerge as the top running back last season on that team, but you still have Rachaad White there. Sean Tucker has shown that he can be effective too when given the opportunity. So I do worry about the potential that this backfield can be kind of a committee, for lack of better words. I'm not expecting a 50-50 split or anything like that. I think it'll probably be more like 65-35 or something to that effect, maybe 60-40. But the target share is what concerns me, because now that they do have Godwin coming back and they do have Ibuka in the fold, of course you got Cade Otton still there, Mike Evans, Jalen McMillan was okay at times last year. Just is Bucky Irving going to get the receiving work that can help give him the value that he had last season? I'm a little concerned about that. I wouldn't really like him in the 2nd round. I would kind of prefer him to go maybe a round or 2 later for me to feel comfortable with that pick. So Rachaad White, that's a name that's interesting to me given that he is going so late. Remember, Rachaad White is not too far removed from his breakout season. So I don't love it, but if you're looking for a backup to kind of see what happens, especially if Bucky Irving gets hurt, this is very good value for you. Sean Tucker should not be drafted, but he is a name to monitor considering he's a talented player that can be successful with a given opportunity. The wide receivers, Mike Evans is the staple of this offense. He is getting a little bit old, though, so you are kind of taking a risk with that when you draft Mike Evans, and he is going high enough in the mid-4th round that he does give you some good upside, but I would probably prefer him go a little bit later personally. That said, Mike Evans, I think, will still be good for fantasy. I just don't know if he gives you the elite upside of some of the guys in that range. So, for example, you've got Rashee Rice around there. I think those two will finish relatively equal to each other. If you want to go with a little bit more high upside, you could go with T. Higgins or Marvin Harrison Jr., which are going around the same range as Mike Evans if you're going for more upside, albeit a greater risk of it not working out. But Mike Evans, best receiver on this team, and I think he will probably stay that way, but there are more mouths to feed, so that's kind of working against Mike Evans a little bit. Chris Godwin, remember, he was top 5 wide receiver before he was injured last season. There were many stretches where he was the number 1 overall wide receiver on a given week, and then by week 6 of the regular season, he was still number 1 overall. So he looked excellent last season, coming off a major knee injury though, so we'll see how he looks. Not a bad chance to take a risk. Not a bad risk to take a chance on him though in the 8th round. Emeka Ibuka going even later in the 12th round. It's not a bad idea, and it's not costing you that much. I just don't really see the opportunity for him to go in and just overtake Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. If perhaps he does, then that would be an amazing draft pick for Tampa Bay to just basically restock their wide receiver core. But those are the names to monitor. Jalen Millen in the deepest of leagues. He looked better as he went through the second half of last season, but not really a name that I think will really get involved. And then Tez Johnson, 7th round draft pick out of Oregon. A lot of people liked him in the year prior, but kind of fell off a little bit this season. He's this past season in the NFL draft process. He's a name to monitor at least because of his upside that he had before, at least in the past. Maybe he can figure something out here in Tampa but doesn't have a lot of opportunity. At tight end, Cade Otton So Cade Otton actually did look very good at times last season, and in my tight end video, I talked about him there. I'm a little bit concerned about just what his role will be here, considering there are so many mouths to feed. But what I do like about Cade Otton is that when he did have opportunity last season, he looked pretty good. And he had a couple games where he was getting, like 10 targets, looking like he could be the centerpiece of an offense. So we'll see kind of what this new OC does. But Cade Otton is a name that's interesting. And among a guy who's not getting drafted either, it's something to keep an eye on. The other tight ends, not really very interesting to me on this team. The defense is pretty solid in Tampa, and I like them as a unit that can be streamed on a given week and could potentially become a top 10 defense. They've got a lot of talent on that team. And they're not going to really cost you much draft capital. So this is a good one to potentially that you could pick up early in certain matchups and stream, and then they give you some upside to hold later in the season too. And then Chase McLaughlin as the kicker. He was actually pretty effective last year, and again, a guy may not get drafted, will probably give you some good value too. So that's a kicker to keep an eye on this team too. Well, that's all that I've got for the NFC South. We have one more division to preview, which will come out later this week, the NFC West. And then we will start focusing a little bit more on our mock drafts. So stay tuned for that. And as always, if you got any questions, send them in the comment section below and subscribe to the channel. We'll see you guys next time. Bye.